The storm outside echoed the storm within me as I stood in my late father's study, staring at the sealed envelope on the mahogany desk. My heart pounded as I whispered, "Dad, you promised we'd be together in this." The paper felt heavy as I slid it open, hands trembling. My brother Daniel, always so composed, lingered in the doorway with a smug grin, his eyes betraying nothing but coldness. When I read the words, my chest tightened. The will stripped me of everything, leaving Daniel the sole heir. I gasped, "This can't be real," my voice breaking like shattered glass. Daniel said, "Father trusted me, not you," his tone sharp like a dagger. The air thickened as the storm outside rattled the windows, thunder clashing with my grief. Anger surged, boiling through veins once tied with love. I staggered back, clutching the paper, betrayal dripping from every line. The room closed in, suffocating me. I swore silently, "I'll make him pay." I remembered how different things were before greed poisoned our bond. Summers at the old farmhouse had been filled with laughter, our family intact. I said, "Daniel, we had everything, why this?" The memory twisted in me as my father's voice echoed from years ago. Brothers must stand together. Back then, Daniel's hand was always on my shoulder, reassuring, protective. Now that hand was clenched in ambition, striking me down without remorse. I walked through the empty dining hall, where portraits of ancestors stared back with solemn judgment. My mother's photo hung crooked on the wall, her smile frozen in time, reminding me of promises broken. The warmth of family dinners, the sound of clinking glasses, all gone. My chest tightened as ghosts of laughter filled the silence. I whispered, "Family was meant to last forever." But the echo came back hollow. The betrayal felt even sharper, knowing what we had once been. The truth of Daniel's schemes revealed itself in fragments. I overheard him whispering on the phone, his voice laced with arrogance. He said, "The money is mine now, he won't fight." Each word stabbed deeper. My fists clenched as I hid in the hallway, shadows swallowing me whole. I thought, he plotted this all along. I remembered his cold smile during the funeral, the way his eyes avoided mine when condolences poured in. Even then, he was planning, calculating, stripping away my future with every forged step. My father's signature, twisted by deceit, screamed betrayal louder than thunder. My heart pounded as I realized the depth of Daniel's treachery. The brother who once defended me at schoolyard fights now buried me under lies. I whispered into the darkness, "He thinks I'll break, but I won't." The decision hardened in me, burning brighter than grief, sharper than rage. It was then that Robert entered my life, my father's old friend who had seen betrayal before. His voice was steady when he said, "James, vengeance is a dangerous fire, but sometimes it burns the right path." His eyes held scars of battles I could only imagine, yet there was wisdom there too. Robert became my compass in the storm, guiding me where my anger threatened to blind. He reminded me of truths I was too shattered to see. I asked, "Why help me now?" And he answered, "Because I once lost everything to a man like Daniel." His words struck deep, echoing in my chest like thunder in the valley. I realized my struggle was not mine alone. The path was set, and Robert's guidance was the lantern I hadn't known I needed. With him by my side, I felt my resolve sharpen into something unbreakable. The night I swore vengeance, the storm outside mirrored my fury. I stood at the edge of the cliff behind the farmhouse, waves crashing below, salt stinging my face. The will, damp in my grip, felt like chains pulling me under. Daniel's smug words echoed, "Father trusted me, not you." I shouted into the roaring wind, "I'll take back what's mine." My voice was swallowed by thunder, yet it felt like a vow carved into the night itself. The darkness no longer frightened me, it fueled me. I thought of my father's promise of unity and how Daniel had spat on. I thought of my mother's smile, of the dinners filled with warmth now turned to ash. My rage was no longer grief, it was a weapon. I knew I could not undo the betrayal, but I could make him pay. The night became the witness to my oath. The storm within me had not subsided when I finally faced Daniel. His smug grin was etched deeper as I demanded, "Tell me how you did it." He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes gleaming with superiority. "Father trusted me, James," he said, the venom in his tone unmistakable. The room felt suffocating, the smell of cigars and old leather heavy in the air. I slammed my hand on his desk, shouting, "You forged his will, didn't you?" He only chuckled, sipping whiskey like a king secure on his throne. My voice cracked. "We were supposed to share everything." Daniel smirked, replying, "You were always too weak to deserve it." The weight of his betrayal pressed down harder, twisting inside me. I stared into his cold, unflinching eyes, realizing he no longer saw me as his brother. At that moment, our bond was severed, leaving only war between us. The night after our confrontation, I walked home along the cobblestone street, shadows stretching taller than me. Then he appeared. Victor, Daniel's loyal enforcer, a man built like stone. His footsteps echoed like thunder, blocking my path. He said, "Stay out of this, James, or you'll regret it." His voice was low, rough, a growl in human form. My chest tightened, but I stood firm. "I'm not afraid of you," I forced out, though fear gripped me like chains. Victor stepped closer, towering, the streetlight casting his shadow over me like a beast ready to strike. He smirked and whispered, "You should be," before shoving me against the cold brick wall. Pain flared through my back, but rage burned hotter. I met his gaze, silent yet defiant. The message was clear. Daniel was willing to use force to break me. But instead of fear, his threat lit my fire even brighter. Shaken but unbroken, I found solace in Mark, my childhood friend, who had always been my anchor. He hesitated when I explained Daniel's betrayal, his brows furrowing with doubt. "James," he said, "this fight could destroy you." His concern was genuine, his voice trembling with fear for me. I leaned forward, my fists clenched, declaring I can't let him win. Mark sighed heavily, torn between loyalty and reason. His eyes betrayed the conflict within him. He wanted to protect me, yet dreaded the road I was choosing. He muttered, "If you go down this path, there's no turning back." His words carried weight, but my heart was already set. I could see his hesitation, but also the flicker of loyalty that had never left him. Mark finally nodded slowly, saying, "Then I'll stand with you even if it kills us." The bond of brotherhood found where blood had failed me. That night I sat in my room staring at an old photograph of my mother, the victim of Daniel's schemes long before mine. She had given everything to protect us, yet her trust was betrayed. I whispered, "You deserve better." Her absence cut like a blade sharper than any words. I remembered how her laughter filled the halls, how she kept us together when Father's sternness felt unbearable. Daniel had twisted her legacy, just as he twisted our father's trust. She was the silent victim, the wound that never healed. Every choice Daniel made was a scar on her memory. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the photo tighter, the edges cutting into my skin. I swore to her memory, "I won't let him destroy everything you built." She was gone, but her shadow remained the spark, igniting my resolve. Her pain became the anchor for my vengeance. The following day, I sought legal recourse, stepping into the grand courthouse with trembling hope. My lawyer whispered, "We'll fight this, James." But as the judge read the forged will aloud, my hope cracked. Daniel sat smugly on the other side, whispering to his lawyer with an arrogant grin. The weight of authority pressed against me like chains, every word confirming his stolen inheritance. My fists clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. I whispered, "This is injustice," but no one heard me. The gavel struck, granting Daniel full control. My breath hitched, the sound louder than thunder in my chest. Daniel smirked across the courtroom, victory painted on his face. The law had been twisted in his favor, leaving me powerless. But though the system failed me, my resolve hardened. This was no longer about fairness. It was war, and I would win by other means. I spent sleepless nights poring over old files, chasing the faintest trace of Daniel's lies. My desk became a battlefield of receipts, contracts, and bank slips. Every paper I touched burned with the truth I sought. I muttered, "He thinks he covered his tracks." In the dim light of my lamp, I uncovered transfers, subtle yet damning. Daniel's greed seeped into numbers like poison. My pulse quickened as patterns emerged, threads weaving his betrayal into undeniable evidence. I felt both fury and hope ignite within me. The air reeked of ink and dust, but to me, it smelled like justice. Each discovery was a knife I would one day turn against him. My fingers trembled as I whispered, "Your arrogance will be your downfall, brother." The night bled into dawn, shadows crawling away as the weight of truth grew heavier in my hands. I knew this was the first crack in his empire. Robert visited again, his steps heavy with the wisdom of past scars. He sat across from me, eyes narrowing as he scanned the papers I'd gathered. "You're digging into a pit of snakes," he warned, his voice rough yet steady. I countered, "The truth has to come out, Robert." He leaned back, shadows of firelight carving deep lines into his face. He revealed his own tale, how betrayal once stripped him of everything, leaving only bitterness behind. "I nearly let revenge consume me," he admitted, his gaze locked on mine. His words struck me like thunder, but my resolve did not waver. "I'm not afraid of being consumed," I said. He shook his head slowly, muttering, "That's what I once said too." His cautionary tale pressed against my heart, yet it only sharpened my conviction. The fire between us crackled, a mirror of the storm raging inside my chest. Daniel flaunted his stolen fortune with cruel arrogance. At a lavish party, his voice boomed as he toasted himself, "To the future I've earned." My fists clenched from the crowd as I watched him bask in stolen glory. The chandelier sparkled above, its brilliance mocking the darkness inside me. He laughed with shallow friends, every smirk on his face a dagger in my chest. He had built his throne upon lies, and the crowd adored him blindly. I whispered under my breath, "You're not untouchable." His gaze swept the room until it locked with mine for a fleeting second, a smirk curling his lips. In that glance he knew I was watching, and I knew he relished it. Rage coursed through me, but I forced myself to remain silent, to stay hidden in plain sight. Every cruel toast, every shallow laugh, only made my resolve burn hotter. He would choke on his pride. That evening, a tense dinner unfolded in the old family dining hall. Daniel sat at the head of the table like a king, arrogance dripping from every glance. Mark sat beside me, tense, his eyes darting nervously. I forced a smile, saying, "Strange how Father's table feels so cold now." Daniel replied smoothly, "It feels warmer without liars." His words sliced sharper than the knife in my hand. Mark leaned closer, whispering, "Don't let him bait you." The flicker of candles cast shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Every clink of silver cut into the silence, every sip of wine tasted like venom. The ghosts of our family dinners haunted me, laughter replaced by venomous silence. I stared into Daniel's eyes, hatred boiling, while he savored every bite like a victor at a feast. My appetite was gone, replaced only with the hunger for vengeance that grew with each passing second. After dinner, Mark confronted me under the cold night sky. His voice trembled, "James, you're spiraling into something dangerous." I clenched my fists, my breath fogging in the chill. "He destroyed everything, Mark," I spat, anger shaking every word. Mark's eyes glistened with fear and loyalty. "I've stood with you this far, but I'm scared of who you're becoming." His words pierced me deeper than Daniel's lies. I turned away, my chest tight with conflict. Mark's hesitation mirrored the storm in my heart. I wanted to scream that vengeance was the only path, yet I saw the truth in his worried eyes. He pleaded softly, "Don't lose yourself chasing him." The silence stretched, broken only by wind rustling through the trees. I whispered, "I can't stop now," my voice cracking under the weight. His expression fell, torn between loyalty and fear, as the distance between us widened like a chasm. Victor came at dawn like a storm wearing boots. He cornered me behind the mill, gravel crunching as he said, "Walk away while you still can." The cold bit through my jacket, but fear bit harder. I answered, "Tell Daniel I am not leaving." He stepped closer, breath like smoke, and hissed, "Orders are orders." His fist slammed my ribs, and the world flashed white. I tasted iron, staggered, and refused to drop. He grabbed my collar and growled, "You are outmatched." I rasped, "Truth outmatches fists." He slammed me into the brick, and the bricks remembered. Pain clawed my lungs, yet rage steadied my feet. Somewhere far off, sirens sang like broken angels. Victor released me with a shove and said, "This was a courtesy." Gravel skittered as he vanished, leaving his warning like a stain on the air. I pressed a hand to my ribs and whispered, "I will not break." Back at the farmhouse, I searched the study like a diver short on air. Robert watched in silence until the desk drawer stuck. He said, gentle with ghosts. I pried it free and found a false bottom. Dust rose like secrets, shaking off sleep. Inside lay a ledger bound in cracked leather and a key taped beneath. My hands shook as I whispered, "Father hid this." Robert leaned closer and said, "Or someone did not want Daniel to find it." The pages mapped shell firms and payments, numbers arranged like footprints in wet sand. I traced a transfer to a notarized office across town. Robert said, "This is your thread, pull it." I felt hope spark against the bruise on my ribs. I said, "If this holds, the will falls apart." He nodded once and replied, "Then hold tight when it does." The house, once heavy with silence, hummed with purpose. By nightfall the pain spread, and doubt followed it like a shadow. Mark found me on the porch staring at the fields. He said, "You look wrecked." I answered, "Maybe I am." The bruise in my ribs counted the seconds with each breath. Mark paced and asked, "What if the ledger is another trap?" Wind worried the eaves like teeth on bone. I said, "Then I lose twice, once to him and once to fear." He sat beside me and whispered, "I hate seeing you vanish into this." I laughed without humor and said, "I was already vanishing." The words hung like frost. Mark placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Then breathe here now." I closed my eyes and let the cold steady me. For a heartbeat, the war went quiet. I opened my eyes and said, "Tomorrow, I test the key." The porch creaked like an oath taking shape. Morning brought a hard frost and Robert's iron calm. He set black coffee on the table and said, "Pain teaches, but it also lies." I sipped and winced, then asked, "What did it teach you?" He said, "That revenge is a river that wants to drown its swimmer." I answered, "I am not drowning." He studied me and replied, "Then build banks." He handed me a folder of affidavits and contacts he trusted. He said, "Use law like a blade and mercy like a shield." I felt the room expand around those words. Doubt slid off them like rain off slate. I said, "If I fall, promise you will pull me out." He nodded once and said, "Only if you reach back." The clock ticked, patient and stern. I gathered the ledger, the key, and the names. Robert said, "Go straight. Keep records, expect claws." I breathed out and stood taller. At the notary's office the carpet smelled like new lies. Punctual carpet smelled like new lies. I handed over the key with a steady face. The clerk smiled too fast and said, "Right this way." A vault drawer slid open and revealed only blank folders. My stomach fell through the floor. Daniel had been here first. The clerk said, "Is there a problem?" I answered, "Not for you." A phone buzzed and my name blinked on the screen from an unknown number. Daniel said, "Chasing ghosts suits you." I said, "You cannot scrub every print." He laughed and replied, "I can if I own the soap." The line went dead and the room shrank around me. Rage rose, then sharpened into focus. Blank folders still weighed something, and that weight was proof of theft. I photographed everything, logged times, logged faces, logged silence. I walked out with nothing and somehow more than before. The trap had teeth, but so did I. The twist came like a knife in the dark. A letter slid under my door, no return address, only my name, written in sharp strokes. Inside I found copies of transactions signed not by Daniel, but by Robert. My chest clenched as the firelight flickered across the page. Robert, my mentor, the man who guided me, had once been tied to Daniel's schemes. I whispered, "Why did you hide this?" My mind replayed his warnings, his scars, and suddenly they felt less like wisdom and more like confession. I staggered to my feet, fury and heartbreak colliding. Mark entered and asked, "What's wrong?" I shoved the letter into his hands, voice trembling. "Robert was part of it," Mark muttered. "Then we can't trust anyone." The room spun, betrayal layered upon betrayal. I whispered, "The snake slithers deeper than I thought." The truth cut me open, and the wound bled fire. I left before dawn, the house behind me heavy with silence. Daniel's enforcer Victor lurked in every shadow, so I hid in abandoned warehouses near the river. My ribs ached with every breath, but I refused to stop. Mark's warnings rang in my ears, yet I couldn't return. I whispered, "If I stay, I die. If I run, I fight." Rats scurried across the floor. Broken glass crunched underfoot, and the smell of rusted iron clung to my lungs. I lit a single lantern, the flame quivering like my resolve. I unfolded the ledger and the letter, mapping a war on the cracked cement floor. My voice echoed, "He wants me gone, but I'm still standing." Wind rattled loose boards as if the building itself whispered doubts. I pulled my jacket tighter, chest burning, but my spirit colder than steel. Exile had become my training ground, not my grave. It was Mark who risked everything to find me. He slipped through the warehouse door, his voice hushed. "James, you're freezing." I snapped, "You shouldn't be here," but relief cracked my anger. He dropped a bag of food and medicine, his eyes wet with worry. "You'll kill yourself out here," he muttered. I sank onto a crate, groaning better than letting him win. Mark knelt beside me, pressing the food into my hands. "No, better is fighting smart." His loyalty tore at my hardened shell, reminding me what brotherhood should have been. I whispered, "You could walk away." He shook his head, firm and steady. "Not this time." My throat tightened, gratitude fighting with guilt. I realized his choice bound him to my vengeance, and it might cost him everything. Still, in that freezing place, his presence lit a fire brighter than any lantern. Robert appeared days later, his face lined heavier than ever. He said, "James, I see your doubt in me." My fists clenched as I snapped, "You lied to me." His shoulders sagged, eyes clouded with regret. "I was part of it once, long ago, but I walked away," he admitted. The words struck like a hammer. I barked. "And you never told me?" he said, "because I knew it would make you hate me instead of Daniel." My rage boiled, yet I heard truth in his voice, a truth carved by shame. He added, "I help you now because I refuse to repeat my mistake." Silence stretched as dust floated in the air between us. My chest heaved, my voice broke. "Then prove it, Robert. Prove you're not him." His face hardened, not offended but resolute. "I will," he said. In that moment, he became both my betrayer and my ally. When the night fell, I stood on the riverbank with the will crumpled in my hand. The stars glimmered above, silent witnesses. Daniel's words echoed, "Father trusted me, not you." I shouted into the darkness, "I will take back everything." My voice broke into the wind, and I felt the vow carve itself deeper into my bones. My reflection on the water seemed like a stranger, harder, colder, shaped by fire and betrayal. I remembered my mother's photo, my father's promises, and all that Daniel had stolen. The time for hesitation was gone. I whispered, "Revenge is my compass now." The night swallowed the words, but I knew they would carry me forward. For the first time, fear no longer lingered in my chest, only purpose. I gripped the wheel tighter and walked away from the riverbank, each step a drumbeat of war. The night smelled of gasoline and blood when Victor finally struck. He dragged me into the abandoned yard, his fists heavier than stone. He snarled, "Daniel says you're finished." Pain erupted in my chest, but I refused to kneel. I coughed, "Tell Daniel I'm still breathing." His knuckles crashed again, vision swimming red. Every blow felt like thunder in my bones. Rage burned hotter than pain, pushing me back onto my feet. I spat blood and muttered, "You'll have to kill me to stop me." Victor smirked, "That can be arranged." The moon watched coldly as the fight turned savage, steel against will. I ducked one swing and slammed him into the rusted fence, the sound echoing like war drums. My ribs screamed, but so did my fury. His strength was brute, but my resolve was sharper. In that chaos I realized survival wasn't enough. I had to win. Daniel's empire began to crack in public. At a charity gala, whispers cut through the glittering air like knives. I watched from the shadows as guests passed around copies of the ledger pages I had leaked. Murmurs grew, faces twisted in disbelief. Daniel's smile faltered for the first time, his glass trembling. One man muttered, "This doesn't look right," and another hissed, "Fraud." I felt vindication burn in my chest. Daniel raised his voice, "Lies, all lies." But his words clanged hollow against the suspicion swirling like smoke. He looked around, desperate for allies, but saw only doubt. I whispered, "Now they see you as I do." The chandeliers sparkled mockingly above his unraveling facade. For once, the crowd's eyes were daggers, not daggers in my back, but in his. His mask slipped, and in its place stood the liar he had always been. The war was tilting. Robert's sacrifice came like a silent storm. He met me in the alley behind the courthouse, his face carved with resignation. He pressed a folder into my hand and said, "This is the nail in his coffin." I saw fear in his eyes, but also peace. Before I could speak, headlights flared and Victor emerged, blade in hand. Robert shoved me aside, taking the strike meant for me. I screamed his name as crimson stained his coat. He gasped, "Finish what I couldn't." My hands shook as I tried to hold him, his life slipping like sand. Victor retreated into the shadows, his duty done. Robert's eyes locked on mine. No fear, only defiance. He whispered, "Don't waste it." Then his chest stilled, and the alley became a grave. My breath tore the night open as grief turned to fire. His death became my weapon. Grief hardened into steel as I studied Robert's final gift. The folder contained sworn statements, signatures, and transfers, undeniable proof of Daniel's fraud. I sat at the kitchen table, candlelight flickering, every page burning into my mind. Mark said softly, "This is it, James, the final piece." My hands shook, not from fear but from the weight of justice. I whispered, "He can't hide anymore." Each document was a bullet, every signature a blade. The firelight painted my face with shadows of resolve. I saw Robert's eyes in my memory, urging me forward. I stacked the papers neatly, binding them with trembling fingers. The silence of the house thundered like drums of war. Mark placed a steady hand on my shoulder and said, "Then let's end this." I nodded, my voice steady as stone. "Tomorrow, Daniel falls." For the first time, the finish line burned clear. The day of reckoning began under the weight of oak beams in the courthouse. Daniel sat across from me, arrogance drained into unease. The judge's gavel echoed like a hammer on bone. I stood with the folder clutched tight, heart pounding but steady. My lawyer's voice rang out, "We present new evidence." Gasps filled the chamber as pages were revealed, each one tearing Daniel's mask apart. He stammered, "Forgery, lies," but the judge silenced him. I met Daniel's eyes and said, "This is justice." His face twisted in desperation, the predator now cornered prey. The gallery whispered like a tide turning, and Daniel's empire crumbled in their eyes. The gavel struck again, sealing his fate in wood and echo. My chest swelled, not with triumph, but with release. For the first time since the will, I could breathe. But I knew the war wasn't over until he broke. The final blow to Daniel's empire came swift. In the courthouse, I rose with evidence stacked like weapons. The gallery buzzed with whispers, their judgment heavier than the judge's gavel. Daniel's mask shattered as I said, "You stole, you lied, and now the truth buries you." His face twisted with panic, sweat glistening on his temples. He spat back, "I built everything, you're nothing." But the crowd no longer believed him. The judge's words rang, "Fraud confirmed." Gasps filled the room, and Daniel collapsed into his chair, broken crown slipping. For the first time, power drained from him, leaving only fear. I felt no triumph, only release, as if the chains he placed on me had finally snapped. Justice had spoken, and it roared louder than his lies ever could. Victor appeared at the courthouse steps, his shadow long under the harsh sun. He stared at me with a storm behind his eyes. "Daniel's finished," I said, waiting for his move. His fists tightened, then loosened as his shoulders sagged. For the first time I saw doubt crack his hardened face. He muttered, "I was his weapon, but weapons get discarded." His gaze met mine, raw and conflicted. I answered, "Then stop being his weapon." The silence stretched heavy between us until he finally turned away, muttering, "We're done." For years he was Daniel's shield, but now he walked away, leaving my brother alone in ruin. The chains of loyalty shattered, not with violence, but with choice. Watching Victor vanish into the crowd, I realized even monsters crave freedom. Daniel's desperation boiled over that night. In the mansion stripped of grandeur he screamed, "It was supposed to be mine!" His hands trembled as he hurled glass against the wall, shards glittering on marble like broken promises. I stood across the room, calm in his chaos. "You took everything and still lost," I said, my voice steady. His eyes burned with hatred, the predator cornered by his own trap. He lunged, but his steps faltered, body weak from the weight of his downfall. The silence between his screams revealed the truth. He was hollow, fueled only by greed. I whispered, "This ends tonight, brother." His glare faltered into something almost human, fear. In that moment, I knew his empire had died long before the gavel struck. The climax came in silence. Daniel and I faced each other on the balcony, city lights flickering below. Wind tugged at our clothes, carrying the weight of years. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but his words rang empty. I stepped closer, voice low, "I regret nothing but trusting you." His jaw trembled as his hand clutched the railing, knuckles white. For a moment I thought he might strike, but instead he sagged against the cold iron, broken by truth. I turned away, leaving him in the ruins of his own making. My footsteps echoed finality across the marble floor. Behind me, silence reigned, heavier than thunder. The battle was not won by fists or blades, but by exposing his rot until he collapsed under its weight. At dawn I stood at the cliff where it all began, the will in ashes drifting into the sea. The horizon glowed with pale fire, painting the waves gold. I whispered, "Father, it's done." "Mother, I kept the promise." My voice cracked, but did not break. The wind carried the ashes into the rising sun, and for the first time in years, I breathed without chains. Mark stepped beside me, silent, his presence enough. I said softly, "Revenge didn't heal me, but justice freed me." The cliff stood silent, the sea roaring like applause. Behind me lay betrayal, ahead only uncertain light. My story ended not in triumph, but in survival, and survival was victory enough. As the ashes vanished, so did the boy my brother betrayed. What remained was a man forged in fire.